The night always holds secrets unseen by the eye. Behind the darkness, there are whispers that not everyone can hear, footsteps that shouldn't exist, and shadows that move on their own in the corner of the room. This story isn't just a tale to scare you, it's something that may have happened, or could be happening right now, closer than you think. Listen carefully, and make sure you're not alone while hearing it. The evening sky in Marianna, Florida, turned a deep shade of orange as a black SUV rolled down an empty road. The town felt quiet, too quiet for a place with a legend as dark as Bellamy Bridge. Inside the car sat 4 people, all with the same destination but different reasons for coming. Daniel Danny Whitmore, a skeptical investigative journalist, saw this as just another assignment. He had debunked countless ghost stories before, and this one would probably be no different. But something about this case felt off. Maybe it was the sheer number of people who warned him not to come. Next to him, Eliza Carter, a young paranormal investigator, remained quiet. Unlike Danny, she wasn't here for a story, she was here for answers. Her older brother, Samuel Carter, vanished 5 years ago near Bellamy Bridge, and she had spent years trying to piece together what happened. In the back seat, Mark Holloway, the cameraman, stared out the window, memorizing every detail of the passing landscape. He had filmed countless crime documentaries, but this trip felt different. There was a weight in the air, an unseen presence watching. Beside Mark, Chloe Anderson, a historian obsessed with the Bellamy Bridge case, flipped through old documents. Legend said Elizabeth Bellamy burned to death on her wedding night, but Chloe had found something unsettling, accounts suggesting she was murdered. After hours on the road, they arrived at a small inn on the outskirts of town. The building was old, its wooden sign creaking in the wind. A frail woman with piercing eyes greeted them with a hesitant smile. "You're here for the bridge, aren't you?" she murmured. Danny nodded. "Just researching its history." The woman let out a deep sigh. "Don't go after sunset." Chloe leaned in. "Why not?" The woman looked at them one by one before whispering, "Because at night, she searches for someone." After unpacking their things, the group walked to the town square, hoping to find locals who knew more about the legend. Marianna was small, with old brick buildings and a history stretching back centuries. They stopped at a quiet cafe, where an elderly man named Henry Lawson was known for sharing local stories. Chloe approached him first, introducing herself as a historian. "I've heard about Bellamy Bridge," Chloe said. "But the story seems incomplete. Can you tell us more?" Henry studied her, then glanced at the others. "You all want to know?" Danny nodded, casually turning on his phone's recorder. Henry sighed, shaking his head. "Elizabeth Bellamy wasn't just a woman who died in a fire. That's the simple version of the story. But the truth? The truth is, some say she was murdered." Eliza froze. "Murdered?" Henry nodded. "Her body was found near the bridge, but some records suggest she didn't die from the burns, she died from something else." Chloe's curiosity burned brighter. "What really happened?" Henry's expression darkened. "You really want to know? Fine. But remember this, never say her name at the bridge. Never call her." That night, back at the inn, Chloe spread her documents across the table, reading aloud. "So," she began, "Elizabeth Bellamy was the wife of Dr. Samuel Bellamy. They married in the 1830s, and their wedding night was supposed to be perfect." Danny crossed his arms. "But something went wrong." Chloe nodded. "Most stories say her dress caught fire from a candle, and she ran outside, burning. She collapsed near the bridge and died hours later." Mark, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Then why do some people think she was murdered?" Chloe inhaled slowly. "Because some believe the fire wasn't an accident. Samuel Bellamy had enemies, and some say Elizabeth was targeted to get to him." Eliza closed her eyes for a moment, feeling a strange presence creeping in. "Or maybe," she whispered, "this curse is older than we think." The next day, they decided to visit the site before sunset. Bellamy Bridge was deep in the woods, and the only way there was a narrow, overgrown trail. As they walked deeper into the trees, the air grew unnaturally still. No birds. No wind. Danny looked around. Why does it feel like the whole forest just stopped? Eliza's skin prickled. Because we're not alone. Mark adjusted his camera, recording everything. Chloe scanned the surroundings, looking for anything unusual. Then, through the tangled branches, the bridge appeared. A weathered wooden structure spanning a dark river. Bellamy Bridge. And there, carved into a massive tree at the bridge's entrance, was one word, Elizabeth. Chloe stepped closer, running her fingers over the carving. This looks fresh. Danny raised an eyebrow. Or maybe, she made it. Mark lowered his camera suddenly. Wait. Did you hear that? Silence. Then, faintly, drifting on the wind. A woman's voice. Help me, find me. They exchanged uneasy glances. They had just arrived. But Bellamy Bridge's curse had already begun. Mark gripped his camera tightly, his knuckles turning white. The whisper had been soft, almost delicate, but there was something unnatural about it, like a voice not meant for this world. Eliza turned to Danny. Tell me you heard that. Danny hesitated, but he couldn't deny it. Yeah. I did. Chloe took a deep breath and stepped onto the bridge. The wooden planks groaned under her weight. The air here was different, thicker, heavier, like the humidity had turned into something more suffocating. As she moved forward, a sharp chill crawled up her spine. Then, a handprint appeared in the dust on the railing. Small. Delicate. But fresh. Chloe took a step back, her heart pounding. Someone else is here. Mark swung his camera toward the handprint, capturing every detail. The others watched in eerie silence as the fingers of the print began to spread, slowly dragging downward as if an unseen force was moving them. Danny exhaled sharply. That's impossible. Eliza stepped forward, her voice a whisper. Elizabeth. The air around them dropped suddenly, freezing their breath in the humid Florida night. Then, from somewhere beneath the bridge, a splash. Like something heavy had just fallen into the water. Or someone. Danny rushed to the edge of the bridge, aiming his flashlight at the dark river below. The water was calm, smooth like glass, too smooth. No ripples. No movement. Yet the splash had been real. Eliza's fingers dug into the railing. It sounded like someone fell in. Chloe's mind raced. The legend says Elizabeth ran into the woods, burning, but what if she fell? What if she drowned? Mark zoomed in with his camera. There's something in the water. The group leaned in closer. At first, it just looked like a shadow beneath the surface. But then, a face emerged. Pale. Hollow eyes. A mouth twisted in silent agony. Eliza gasped, stepping back. Oh my God. The face vanished, yanked downward as if pulled by unseen hands. The water rippled violently, then went still. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Danny turned to the others, his voice steady but low. We need to leave. Now. As they hurried back down the trail, the trees around them seemed to shift. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting like they were alive. Eliza clutched her arms, feeling eyes watching her from the darkness. This place is wrong. Chloe flipped through her notes, her hands shaking. There were reports of people disappearing near the bridge. Some said they heard voices calling them into the woods. Danny kept his focus forward. We stick together. No one wanders off. Then, a child's giggle echoed from behind them. Eliza froze. What was that? Mark turned back, scanning the trees with his camera. It sounded like a little girl. Chloe's heart pounded. There's no record of a child being part of the legend. The giggle came again, closer this time. And then, from behind a tree, something peeked out. A small figure. Pale. Grinning. And wearing a burned wedding dress. Eliza's breath hitched. Run. They bolted down the trail, the sound of footsteps following them. Mark risked a glance back. The girl was gone. But something else was there. A shadow moved between the trees, keeping pace with them. It wasn't running. It wasn't rushing. It was waiting. Danny's chest burned as he ran. We're almost out. The end of the trail was in sight, the warm glow of streetlights just beyond the trees. Then Mark screamed. Eliza spun around just in time to see him pulled off the path, disappearing into the darkness. Mark. She lunged forward, but Danny grabbed her arm, holding her back. No. We can't. Mark's scream cut off. Silence. Then. A voice. Help me, find me. Eliza's eyes filled with horror. It was Mark's voice. But it wasn't coming from Mark. They reached the car, slamming the doors shut, gasping for breath. Eliza stared at the dark trail, her mind racing. We have to go back for him. Danny gripped the steering wheel, his hands trembling. He's gone, Eliza. You heard that voice? That wasn't Mark anymore. Chloe sat in stunned silence, her face pale. The legend isn't just a story. It's real. Eliza clenched her fists. Then we end this. We find the truth. We bring him back. Danny didn't argue. Because deep down, he knew. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. Back at the inn, the silence was unbearable. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Mark's empty camera bag. He was gone. Vanished. And they had no idea how to explain it. Chloe sat at the small wooden desk, scrolling through Mark's last recordings. Maybe there's something here. Something that tells us what happened. Danny paced the room, his hands on his head. He was right there. And then nothing. How the hell do you just disappear like that? Eliza rubbed her arms, still feeling the cold that clung to her skin. I don't think he disappeared, she whispered. I think something took him. Then. Chloe sucked in a sharp breath. Guys, you need to see this. They gathered around as she played the last clip from Mark's camera. It showed them running. The shaky footage captured the trees, the dirt path, the flickering light of their flashlights. Then. A shadow. Something stepped into the trail behind them. A figure, barely visible in the dark. Mark must have turned back, zooming in. And there two pale hands reached out from the trees, wrapping around him. Then the screen glitched. Static. And the last frame froze, showing Mark's terrified face, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream. Then, in the corner of the screen, a woman's face, burned and hollow-eyed, staring directly at the camera. And then the footage cut to black. They sat in stunned silence, the weight of the footage settling over them like a heavy fog. Chloe was the first to speak. That wasn't human. Danny swallowed hard. No. It wasn't. Eliza ran a hand through her hair, trying to steady herself. She's not done with us. A gust of wind rattled the windows. The old wooden floor creaked under an unseen weight. Then. A knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. They froze. Danny reached for the doorknob but stopped when he heard it. A voice. Help me, find me. Eliza's blood ran cold. It was Mark's voice. Danny took a step back. That's not him. Chloe grabbed her phone, her hands shaking. The legends say she mimics voices. The knocking came again, harder this time. Danny clenched his jaw. Whoever or whatever is out there, we don't open that door. Then the doorknob turned on its own. The knob rattled violently, the door shaking in its frame. Danny grabbed a chair, wedging it under the handle. We're not letting it in. The knocking stopped. The air inside the room felt suffocating, pressing in on them. Chloe exhaled shakily. We have to figure out what she wants. Eliza stared at the door, her mind racing. She keeps saying the same thing, help me. Find me. Chloe bit her lip. Maybe she isn't just haunting this place. Maybe she's trapped. Danny crossed his arms. So what? We go on a ghost rescue mission. Eliza locked eyes with him. If we want Mark back, maybe we have to. Chloe hesitated, then picked up an old journal from her bag. This belonged to a woman named Margaret Holloway. She lived in Mariana in the early 1900s. She wrote about Bellamy Bridge, about seeing a woman in white. She flipped through the pages, her breath catching as she found an entry. She lingers near the water, searching for something she lost. She calls to us in the night, but we must not answer. To hear her voice is to invite her into our world. Danny frowned. What did she lose? Chloe turned the page, reading the final entry. She waits for the one who can bring her peace. But the price will be heavy. Eliza whispered, what if we're the ones she's been waiting for? They spent the rest of the night gathering as much information as possible. The more they read, the clearer the truth became. Elizabeth Bellamy wasn't just a tragic bride. She was a prisoner of something older. Something darker. Chloe pointed to an old newspaper clipping. After she died, the Bellamy family tried to leave town. But some say their descendants still live here. Danny leaned over the map. If that's true, we need to find them. Eliza tapped the name at the bottom of the article. Henry Lawson. The old man from the cafe. He knew more than he was telling us, she said. And I think he might be the key to all of this. A plan started forming. Find Henry Lawson. Get answers about Elizabeth Bellamy. Find a way to bring Mark back. But as they set their plan in motion, none of them noticed the mirror on the wall, where a faint reflection of a burned woman was watching them. Morning came, but the weight of the night still clung to them. They packed their gear and headed to Henry's house, an old cottage on the outskirts of town. Danny drove, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. The others sat in tense silence, their eyes darting to the trees outside. Eliza checked her phone. No messages. No calls. Nothing from Mark. The road stretched on, the forest growing denser. The car's headlights barely cut through the mist. Then the radio crackled. Static filled the speakers, followed by a faint whisper. Help me, find me. Danny cursed under his breath and shut the radio off. She's playing games. But Eliza's eyes widened. Danny, look in the mirror. He hesitated, then glanced up. In the back seat, between Chloe and Eliza, a figure sat in the shadows. Burned. Hollow-eyed. Smiling. Danny swerved the car off the road. The tires skidded. The world blurred. Then everything went black. The car spun out of control, skidding across the wet dirt road. Danny yanked the wheel, but it was useless. The vehicle slammed into a tree with a sickening crunch. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Eliza gasped for air. Her head pounded, her vision blurred. Chloe groaned beside her, clutching her arm. Danny, still gripping the steering wheel, blinked rapidly as if trying to process what had just happened. Then a whisper. Why did you leave me? Eliza's blood ran cold. She turned her head and saw her. The burned woman sat in the back seat, inches away from her. Pale, scorched skin. Hollow, black eyes. Her twisted smile stretched unnaturally wide. Eliza's scream shattered the silence. Danny jolted, his instincts kicking in. He threw open the car door, stumbling onto the dirt. Chloe followed, her breath ragged. Eliza tried to move, but a cold hand grabbed her wrist. Her entire body froze. The woman leaned in closer, her charred lips parting as if about to speak. Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she was gone. Eliza fell forward, gasping. Danny pulled her up. We need to keep moving. They didn't stop to check the damage. They just ran. They reached Henry Lawson's house just as the sun began to set. It was a small, decaying cabin, surrounded by overgrown weeds. Danny banged on the door. Henry. Open up. The door creaked open. The old man stood there, his tired eyes scanning them. "I told you kids not to go looking for trouble." Chloe pushed past him. "We don't have time for lectures." "We saw her." Henry sighed, locking the door behind them. "I know. She's angry." Eliza wiped the sweat from her forehead. She said, "Why did you leave me?" "What does that mean?" Henry hesitated. Then, he walked over to an old chest in the corner and pulled out a dusty photo album. He flipped to a page filled with old, yellowed newspaper clippings. The headline read, "Bellamy Family Secrets, a Love Lost to the Flames." Danny leaned in. "What is this?" Henry pointed to a name in the article. "Nathaniel Bellamy. Elizabeth's husband." "He was supposed to wait for her," Henry said, voice low. "But he didn't." Chloe's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Henry exhaled, flipping to another page. This time, it showed a picture of Nathaniel, with another woman. She died for a man who had already moved on. Eliza swallowed hard. She wasn't just seeking revenge. She was heartbroken. Henry nodded. "She's looking for the truth. And now that she's found you, she won't stop until you bring it to her." Silence filled the room as the weight of Henry's words sank in. Chloe ran a hand through her hair. "So what do we do? Tell her she was betrayed and hope she moves on?" Henry shook his head. "It's not that simple. Spirits like hers don't just vanish. They need closure." Danny crossed his arms. "And if we don't give it to her?" Henry's eyes darkened. "She'll take one of you." A chill crawled down Eliza's spine. "Mark." She clenched her fists. "Then we have to find a way to bring her peace." Henry sighed. "There might be a way. But it's dangerous." Chloe exhaled. "Great. Of course it is." Henry ignored her and walked over to an old wooden box. He opened it, revealing a stack of handwritten letters. "These were never delivered," he said. "Elizabeth wrote them to Nathaniel, begging him to find her." Eliza's hands trembled as she picked one up. The ink was smudged, the words barely legible, but one line stood out. "I burn, but you do not come for me." "Why, my love? Why do you leave me here?" Danny met Henry's gaze. "You're saying we need to deliver these?" Henry nodded. "Take them to her grave. Read them aloud." Eliza's heart pounded. "And if it works?" Henry's expression darkened. "Then she might finally rest." Chloe hesitated. "And if it doesn't?" Henry's voice was grave. "Then you'll be next." The cemetery was silent. They stood before Elizabeth's grave, the air thick with anticipation. The night was eerily still, no wind, no rustling leaves. Even the crickets had stopped singing. Danny lit a lantern, its warm glow flickering against the headstone. Chloe pulled out the first letter. "Let's just get this over with." Eliza took a deep breath and began to read. "My dearest Nathaniel. I cannot bear this pain. The fire took my body, but it is the loneliness that takes my soul. Please, my love, do not forget me." The wind stirred. A soft whisper echoed through the trees. Danny tightened his grip on the lantern. "Something's happening." Chloe, read the second letter. "I hear your voice in my dreams, but when I wake, you are gone. Have you left me? Have you moved on?" The temperature dropped. A faint humming filled the air. Then, the final letter. Eliza's voice wavered as she read the last words Elizabeth ever wrote. "If I am nothing to you, then I shall be nothing at all. My fire will burn, and so will my heart. But if you still love me, come find me." The moment the words left her lips, a voice whispered behind them. "I waited, and he never came." They turned slowly. Elizabeth stood before them. Her veil was tattered, her dress burned beyond recognition. Her hollow eyes locked onto Eliza's. Then she stepped forward. Eliza's breath hitched. The ghost's presence was suffocating, her energy pressing down on them like a storm. Danny instinctively stepped in front of Eliza, but Elizabeth barely acknowledged him. Her gaze was fixed on the letters in Eliza's hands. Her burned fingers trembled as she reached for them. Then, for the first time, her voice was soft. Pleading. Did he ever read them? Eliza's heart twisted. She could lie. Say that Nathaniel had spent his life mourning her. Or she could tell the truth that he had moved on, leaving her to burn alone. Elizabeth waited. The ground beneath them seemed to pulse, the very air waiting for Eliza's decision. Chloe whispered, Eliza, whatever you say, it's going to decide what happens next. Eliza swallowed hard. And then, she opened her mouth. The night held its breath. Eliza's fingers curled around the letters. The weight of Elizabeth's question pressed against her chest like a boulder. Did he ever read them? The burned woman's eyes searched Eliza's face, desperate, fragile, dangerous. Eliza's throat felt dry. Danny and Chloe barely moved, waiting for her answer. Finally, Eliza spoke. He never read them. The wind howled through the graveyard. Elizabeth's face twisted not in rage, but in grief. The charred edges of her dress fluttered like embers in the dark. He left me, she whispered. He let me die alone. Eliza nodded. Yes. And that's why you're still here. For a moment, Elizabeth just stared. Then her entire body began to tremble. A low, mournful wail tore from her throat, the sound sharp enough to send a shockwave through the trees. The ground beneath them cracked. Danny grabbed Eliza's arm. We need to move now. But Eliza didn't run. Instead, she stepped closer to the ghost. I know it hurts, she said. But you don't have to stay like this. Elizabeth's eyes flickered, as if the fire in her soul was dimming. Then, just as suddenly she was gone. A suffocating silence fell over them. Danny exhaled. Did we just do it? Did we break the curse? Chloe frowned. No. It's never that easy. And she was right. Because a moment later, a single word whispered through the wind. Run. And then the lantern blew out. By morning, they were back at Henry's cabin. The old man sat on his porch, chewing on his pipe, eyes scanning them warily. You look like hell, he muttered. Danny dropped into a chair. Yeah, well, hell almost swallowed us. Eliza sat down beside him, staring at the letters. She's not gone. Henry nodded. She never would be. Chloe folded her arms. So, what now? We gave her the truth. Shouldn't that be enough? Henry let out a long sigh. Not for her. Not until she makes him pay. Eliza glanced up. Nathaniel's already dead. Henry's lips curled into a grim smile. You think that matters? The room fell silent. Then, Henry stood. He walked to an old, rusted metal box and pulled out a set of keys. You want answers? He tossed the keys onto the table. Then you'll need to go to the Bellamy estate. Danny frowned. I thought that place burned down. Most of it did, Henry said. But the basement survived. Chloe narrowed her eyes. And what exactly is in the basement? Henry's face darkened. The one thing Elizabeth never found. The Bellamy estate loomed before them, a skeleton of its former glory. Charred beams jutted toward the sky, and what remained of the stone walls were covered in ivy and decay. Eliza shivered. Why do I feel like we're walking into a trap? Danny tested the front door. It groaned open, revealing darkness. Chloe clicked on her flashlight. Let's get this over with. The inside was a graveyard of forgotten memories, burned furniture, shattered glass, and walls blackened by smoke. Danny led the way toward the basement door. He hesitated before turning the handle. The air beyond was cold. Unnaturally cold. They stepped inside. The stairs creaked beneath them. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. Then they reached it. An old, rotting wooden chest sat in the center of the room, covered in dust. Chloe hesitated. If something jumps out of that thing, I swear. Eliza knelt down and carefully lifted the lid. Inside were more letters. But these were different. The ink was fresh. The handwriting was, not Elizabeth's. Danny's voice was barely a whisper. Who wrote these? Then, from behind them a breath. You shouldn't be here. They spun around. A man stood in the shadows. He was tall, dressed in an old-fashioned black suit, his face obscured by the dim light. Danny raised his hands defensively. Who the hell are you? The man stepped forward. His eyes were hollow, his skin unnaturally pale. His mouth curled into a slow, eerie smile. You were supposed to leave her alone. Eliza's pulse pounded. Nathaniel. The man tilted his head. No. But I know where he is. Chloe tightened her grip on the flashlight. Okay. Where? The man's smile widened. Not where you think. And then, the basement door slammed shut. The room plunged into darkness. Eliza's breath hitched. Turn on the light. Now. Chloe fumbled with the flashlight. The beam flickered, revealing empty space. The man was gone. Danny cursed. This is bad. Really bad. Eliza picked up one of the letters. The ink shimmered unnaturally. The words twisted, shifting before her eyes. The message rewrote itself in front of them. Nathaniel Bellamy's body does not rest here. Eliza's voice wavered. If he's not buried at the graveyard, then where is he? Chloe's face was pale. Then what grave did we stand on last night? Danny grabbed another letter. This time, the words were written in blood. The one meant for you. The ground trembled. The walls groaned. And then the floor beneath them collapsed. They fell. The floor crumbled beneath them, swallowing them whole into the pitch-black void. The sensation of weightlessness lasted only seconds before they hit the ground hard. Danny groaned, struggling to sit up. Is everyone okay? Eliza coughed, dust filling her lungs. I think so. Chloe clicked her flashlight back on, the dim beam flickering to life. They weren't in the basement anymore. They had fallen into a chamber, a hidden room beneath the Bellamy estate. The air was thick, damp, and suffocatingly cold. Walls of rough stone surrounded them, lined with rows of coffins. Eliza's stomach twisted. This isn't just a basement. Chloe ran a trembling hand over the nearest coffin. The wood was ancient, splintered from age. A name was barely visible on the surface. Nathaniel Bellamy. Danny froze. Wait. I thought we were looking for his body. Eliza's pulse pounded. We are. Chloe shined her light further down the chamber. More coffins, more names. Bellamy. 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 A crypt. And at the very end of the room a single coffin stood open. Eliza stepped closer. Inside was a skeleton, dressed in black. The bones were oddly preserved, as if they hadn't fully decayed. And clutched in the corpse's skeletal hand was a letter. Danny swallowed hard. I think we just found Nathaniel. Eliza hesitated before reaching for the letter. The paper crinkled beneath her fingertips, its edges strangely warm despite the cold air. She carefully unfolded it, revealing ink that had not faded. Chloe leaned in, reading over her shoulder. To whoever finds this. I have failed. The sins of the Bellamy family do not rest. My death will not bring peace. She will never stop. She will never forgive. And now, you are part of this, too. Danny exhaled sharply. That's not creepy at all. Eliza continued. I beg you, do not seek the truth. Do not awaken what sleeps beneath this house. There is a price for knowing, and you will pay it, just as I did. A sudden thud echoed from behind them. Danny spun around. What was that? Chloe tightened her grip on the flashlight. Tell me that was just the house settling. Another thud. This time closer. Eliza shoved the letter into her pocket. We need to get out of here. Now. But before they could move, The air shifted, and the coffin next to Nathaniel slammed open. Danny stumbled back, nearly tripping over a pile of rubble. Nope. Nope. Absolutely not. Eliza's breath came in short gasps as the wooden lid crashed onto the floor, revealing another body. Only this one wasn't skeletal. It was fresh. Chloe shone her flashlight at the corpse, her voice barely above a whisper. It's him. Eliza's heart pounded. What? Chloe pointed at the nameplate. Nathaniel Bellamy. Danny's face paled. That's impossible. Eliza pulled out the letter again, scanning the last line. You will pay the price, just as I did. Her blood ran cold. Danny's voice shook. If Nathaniel's body is here, then who the hell was the man in the basement? The temperature plummeted. And then a voice whispered behind them. You shouldn't have looked. A gust of freezing wind swept through the chamber, sending dust and loose debris flying. The flashlight flickered. Danny cursed. We need to leave. Right now. Eliza turned, her eyes darting around the room. Shadows moved against the stone walls, twisting unnaturally. Chloe grabbed her wrist. This is bad. The open coffin groaned, as if something inside was trying to move. And then it sat up. A figure pulled itself from the grave, its head tilting at an unnatural angle. Danny yanked Eliza back. Go. Go. They sprinted toward the collapsed ceiling, scrambling over broken wood and loose rocks. Chloe reached for a ledge, hauling herself up. Eliza turned just in time to see a hand reach for Danny's ankle. He yelped, kicking wildly. Help! Eliza lunged, grabbing his arm and pulling with everything she had. Danny clawed at the ground. His foot came free just as something yanked the shoe off his foot and disappeared into the darkness. They didn't wait to see what it was. They ran. They burst out of the crypt, stumbling into the overgrown ruins of the Bellamy estate. The sky above them had turned a sickly shade of gray, the air thick with something unnatural. Danny doubled over, panting. Never again. Chloe shuddered. What the hell was that? Eliza pulled out the letter again, staring at Nathaniel's words. The sins of the Bellamy family do not rest. Her fingers tightened around the paper. We need to find out what happened here. Danny groaned. Why? Didn't we just barely escape with our lives? Eliza's voice was firm. Because if we don't, this won't stop. And we might be next. Chloe hesitated. Where do we start? Eliza glanced back at the ruined mansion. The Bellamy family records. Danny sighed. Great. More old creepy books. Chloe crossed her arms. Let's just hope the next one doesn't come with a corpse. A gust of wind rushed past them, carrying a single whisper through the trees. It already has. The Bellamy family archives were stored in an old library, a place no one had entered in decades. Eliza, Chloe, and Danny stood before the massive double doors, their wood warped with time. Vines crawled up the stone walls, as if nature itself had tried to bury the past. Danny eyed the building. You sure we want to do this? Eliza didn't answer. She simply pushed the doors open. The scent of mildew and rotting paper filled their lungs. Dust swirled in the dim light filtering through the crack-stained glass windows. Shelves lined the room, filled with crumbling books and faded documents. Chloe ran a hand over one of the desks, stirring up a thick layer of dust. Where do we even start? Eliza pulled out Nathaniel Bellamy's letter. He said the family's sins don't rest. She glanced at the bookshelves. That means whatever happened here is written down somewhere. Danny sighed, grabbing a stack of files. Let's get digging before something tries to kill us again. They spread out, flipping through old records, maps, and handwritten confessions. And then Eliza found it. A diary. The name on the cover made her breath hitch. Margaret Bellamy. Nathaniel's wife. Eliza carefully opened the diary, the ink surprisingly fresh despite its age. The first entry was dated July 4, 1891. My husband believes he is haunted. But he does not know the truth. The Bellamy curse does not belong to the men. It belongs to me. Eliza's hands trembled as she turned the pages. I made a bargain. A desperate plea to something older than this land. The price was paid, but the debt was never settled. Now, she waits in the dark, whispering my name, demanding more. Chloe peered over her shoulder. Who is she? Danny frowned. What kind of bargain are we talking about? Eliza flipped further. The ink became messy, the handwriting frantic. I should not have called her. I should not have answered. She is not a ghost. She is not human. She is, watching. Always watching. Then a final, chilling line. If you are reading this, it is too late for you. She knows you now. A breath of cold air swept through the library. Danny slammed the book shut. Nope. Nope. Absolutely not. The candles on the walls flickered then went out. The room plunged into darkness. A sharp click. Chloe's flashlight flickered on, casting weak beams of light across the library. The shadows seemed deeper, stretching unnaturally across the room. Danny swallowed hard. Guys, we're not alone. A faint scraping noise echoed from the far end of the room. Eliza's pulse pounded. She turned the flashlight towards the sound. The bookshelves were shifting. One by one, they tilted, as if something unseen was moving behind them. Then a whisper. Not in their ears. Inside their heads. You should not be here. Eliza grabbed the diary and shoved it into her bag. We need to go. Danny didn't argue. Chloe was already backing towards the exit. Then the shelves collapsed. Books rained down, dust choking the air. Chloe yelped as something cold brushed against her shoulder. A figure loomed in the darkness. Tall. Unnaturally thin. Its face obscured by shadows. But its eyes were open. And watching. Danny grabbed Chloe's wrist and yanked her towards the door. The figure didn't move. It just watched. Eliza's chest heaved. Run. Now. They sprinted, pushing through falling shelves and tumbling books. The door was just ahead, but then it slammed shut. Danny grabbed the handle, pulling desperately. It won't open. The whisper returned, curling around their ears like icy fingers. The debt remains unpaid. Eliza turned. The figure was gone. The silence was deafening. Then a horrible realization. Where's Chloe? Danny spun in place. She was right next to me. Eliza's throat tightened. Chloe was gone. Only the diary lay on the floor, flipped open to a single phrase, scrawled over and over again. She takes what is owed. The room groaned, like the house itself was breathing. Danny's voice shook. What do we do? We can't just leave her. Eliza stared at the diary. The words blurred together. But one thing stood out. A name. Scrawled in jagged ink, bleeding through the pages. Margaret Bellamy had written it hundreds of times, in desperation, in fear. The name of whatever she had bargained with. Eliza's lips parted. The word felt wrong in her mouth, like speaking it was an invitation. But she said it anyway. And the moment the name left her lips, the house screamed. The house screamed. It wasn't a sound made by wood creaking or wind howling. It was alive. A deep, guttural wail that rattled their bones, shaking the very foundation of the building. Danny clamped his hands over his ears. What did you do? Eliza's mind raced. The name, it wasn't just a name. It was a key. The shadows twisted. And from the depths of the library, Chloe's voice. Eliza. Eliza's head snapped up. Chloe. Danny spun around, eyes darting. Where? I don't see her. But Eliza did. She was standing between the bookshelves, her back to them, barely visible in the dim light. Eliza took a step forward. Chloe, we thought we lost you. Chloe twitched. A sharp, unnatural jerk. Her head tilted too far to the side. And when she turned to face them, her eyes were gone. Empty sockets, black as the void. And yet, she was smiling. Danny grabbed Eliza's arm, yanking her back. "That's not Chloe." The thing wearing Chloe's skin laughed. A sound that was almost human but wrong. It took a step forward. Then another. Its bones cracked as it moved, its limbs bending unnaturally. Danny's grip tightened. What do we do? Eliza's mind reeled. The name she spoke, it had done something. It had woken something up. Chloe's lips parted. But the voice that came out wasn't hers. "You called me." Danny's breathing turned ragged. "Eliza, whatever you did, undo it. Now." But before she could even think, Chloe or what was inside her lunged. Eliza and Danny dove in opposite directions as Chloe's body slammed into the space where they had been. Danny scrambled to his feet. "She's fast. Too fast." Eliza grabbed a fallen book and hurled it. Not because she thought it would help, but because she had to do something. The book hit Chloe's shoulder. And passed through her. Danny paled. "That's not normal." Eliza's heart pounded. "She's not solid anymore." Chloe, or the thing inside Chloe, tilted its head. "You do not understand. This is not a fight. It is a game." Danny swallowed. "What kind of game?" The thing grinned. "Hide and seek." And then the lights went out. Pitch black. The kind of darkness that pressed against their skin, sinking into their lungs. Eliza reached for Danny, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "Don't move." Danny barely breathed. "Where is she?" A whisper right next to his ear. "Everywhere." Danny jerked back. But there was nothing. Eliza's mind raced. If this was a game, then there were rules. She forced herself to remember the diary. Margaret Bellamy's words. "She takes what is owed. You must not be seen." Eliza whispered, "We have to hide." Danny's voice was tight. "Hide where?" "She's everywhere." The whisper came again. Tick-tock. "Run." Eliza grabbed Danny's wrist and ran. Blindly. Desperately. Stumbling over fallen books and shattered wood. Behind them, footsteps. Light. Playful. Like someone enjoying a game. The exit. They had to reach the exit. Danny gasped. "We're not gonna make it." Eliza's foot hit something metal. A mirror. A cracked, dusty mirror standing in the middle of the room. Danny hesitated. "Why is that just there?" Eliza's breath caught. A thought. A horrible, desperate thought. The diary had said, "She takes what is owed." But it never said who she takes. Eliza made a choice. She turned to the mirror and whispered the name again. The darkness rushed forward. And Chloe's body collapsed. Silence. Danny's breath was ragged. Did it work?" Eliza stared at the mirror. Something was inside it. A shadow. Watching. Waiting. Then a whisper. "See you soon." And the mirror shattered. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the abandoned library. Eliza and Danny stood frozen, staring at the broken mirror. The shards on the floor did not reflect them. Instead, the jagged pieces showed something else. A figure stood inside the fragments, its face obscured, watching. Danny swallowed hard. "Tell me you saw that." Eliza's hands trembled. "I saw it." Chloe groaned, shifting on the floor. Her eyelids fluttered open, her body twitching unnaturally as if she were waking up from a nightmare. Danny dropped beside her. "Chloe. Are you okay?" She blinked up at him, but something was wrong. Her eyes weren't hers. They were too dark. Too empty. Then she whispered, "She's still here." Eliza's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Chloe pushed herself up slowly, her movements deliberate. Too controlled. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't belong to her. Danny took a step back. Chloe. She let out a soft chuckle. Not her laugh. Something else was inside her. You thought you won. Eliza's stomach dropped. That wasn't Chloe speaking. It was her. The thing from the mirror. Danny clenched his fists. Let her go. Chloe or the thing in her tilted her head. Why would I? She opened the door for me. I like it here. The temperature in the room plummeted. The air grew thick, suffocating. Eliza grabbed Danny's wrist. We need to get out of here. Now. Chloe's blackened eyes locked onto her. You can't run from your reflection. Then every mirror in the room cracked. The walls groaned. The house shifted. Danny yanked Eliza toward the exit, dragging Chloe with them. Move. They bolted down the corridor, their footsteps echoing against the old wooden floors. Behind them, a sickening crack. Eliza glanced back. Chloe wasn't running anymore. She was floating. Her feet barely touched the ground, her limbs dangling unnaturally. Danny cursed under his breath. We are so screwed. The front door was just ahead. If they could get out, if they could just. A mirror stood in the doorway. Not there before. Not reflecting them. Eliza skidded to a stop. No. No, no, no. The mirror rippled. And then hands reached out. Not just one pair. Dozens. Pulling. Grabbing. Trying to drag them in. Danny kicked at the mirror, but his foot passed through it like water. Eliza screamed as cold fingers wrapped around her arm, yanking her toward the glass. The world blurred, her vision twisting. For a moment, she saw another version of herself inside the mirror. Trapped. Screaming. Then Chloe spoke. I know what you want. The hands froze. The house stilled. Danny's breath came in sharp gasps. What are you talking about? Chloe or the thing inside her grinned. A deal. You took something from me. Now, I take something from you. Eliza's stomach turned. No. We're not bargaining with you. The thing laughed. You already did, the moment you said my name. And the door slammed shut. The silence was deafening. Danny turned to Eliza, panic flashing in his eyes. What do we do? Eliza's mind raced. The rules, there were always rules. If Chloe's body was still here, maybe Chloe was too. Maybe she wasn't gone. Eliza's fists clenched. What do you want? The thing inside Chloe smiled wider. One of you stays. One of you leaves. You choose. The shadows tightened around them. The air grew colder. Danny's voice was barely a whisper. Eliza. She met his gaze. One of them wasn't making it out. And she had seconds to decide. The room felt like it was shrinking. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen but alive. Eliza's heart pounded. There has to be another way. The thing inside Chloe tilted its head. Tick-tock, Eliza. Make your choice. Danny's jaw clenched. Screw you. We're not playing your game. The thing laughed. A sharp, jagged sound that scraped against their ears. You already are. A gust of wind tore through the room, sending books and furniture flying. The floorboards groaned, the walls trembled. Danny grabbed Eliza's wrist. We have to do something now. Eliza's mind raced. The mirror. The hands. The rules. She had called the name. And now, something had to be taken. Unless. Her breath hitched. What if we give it something else? The thing inside Chloe paused. Danny frowned. What? Eliza turned to him, eyes wild. It wants an exchange. What if we offer it something else instead? The thing inside Chloe smiled. Now you're thinking. Danny's fists clenched. We're not giving you a person. The thing let out a soft, mocking sigh. A shame. But I am, flexible. Eliza swallowed hard. What if we give you something that matters just as much? The air shifted. The hands in the mirror retreated slightly. Danny shot her a look. "What are you doing?" Eliza ignored him. "You want something important. Something real." Chloe's lips parted in a grin that wasn't hers. "Yes." The wind died down. Danny stepped closer. "Eliza, what are you?" She turned to him, voice barely above a whisper. "Our memories." Danny's blood ran cold. Eliza exhaled shakily. "We give it our memories of this place, of what happened here. If we forget, it means we can't tell anyone. It means, it wins." Danny's hands trembled. "Eliza." The thing inside Chloe laughed softly. "A fair trade." Danny's chest tightened. "If we do this, if we forget, how do we know it won't come after us again?" The thing inside Chloe shrugged. "You don't." The floor rippled. The mirror shimmered. Danny turned to Eliza. "There has to be another way." Eliza's voice was unsteady. "If we don't do this, one of us stays here forever." Danny's jaw clenched. He hated this. Every part of it. But Eliza was right. The thing inside Chloe watched them expectantly. "Do we have a deal?" Eliza's throat tightened. She turned to Danny. "Together." His fingers curled into fists, then slowly, he nodded. "Together." The shadows closed in. And the world went dark. Eliza gasped, her eyes flying open. She was outside. The air was crisp, the sky dark, the smell of earth and trees filling her lungs. Danny was beside her, breathing heavily. They were in the woods. No house. No Chloe. No mirrors. Eliza sat up quickly. "What?" She froze. Her mind was blank. Something was missing. Danny rubbed his temples. "Why do I feel like?" He stopped. His brows furrowed. Then his expression turned to something like fear. "Why are we here?" Eliza's chest tightened. They didn't remember. But deep inside, something felt wrong. Like a piece of themselves had been taken. A price had been paid. And yet, it wasn't over. Eliza and Danny made their way back to town in silence. They couldn't remember why they had been in the woods. They couldn't remember what had happened. But something lingered. A heaviness in their chests. A whisper at the edge of their minds. And then, as they passed by a storefront window, Eliza glanced at their reflections. Her breath caught. Danny noticed her stop. "What?" Eliza's heart pounded. In the glass, she saw herself. But her reflection wasn't moving. It was smiling. Eliza's breath hitched. Her reflection stood still, wearing the same clothes, the same face, but not moving. And that smile. Danny frowned. "Eliza." She didn't answer. She was frozen in place, staring at the glass. Her reflection blinked a second too late. Eliza's stomach twisted. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Danny followed her gaze to the storefront window. "What are you looking at?" Then his reflection turned its head toward him. Danny's breath hitched. They stumbled back. A shadow passed behind the glass, flickering between their reflections like a phantom. Then, as quickly as it came, it was gone. Danny swallowed hard. "Tell me you saw that." Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. "I did." They weren't free. It was still with them. The two hurried away from the glass, moving fast, their minds racing. Eliza rubbed her temples. "We need to think. There has to be a reason we don't remember." Danny exhaled shakily. "You think it wiped everything?" Eliza nodded. "But not completely. Something is still there. Like, a shadow in my head." Danny hesitated. Then, carefully, he asked, "What was her name?" Eliza's mouth opened but nothing came out. Her chest tightened. The name was right there, just out of reach. A whisper on the edge of her thoughts. Danny cursed under his breath. It took more than just our memories. It took her. Eliza's voice trembled. And if we don't remember her, it's like she never existed? The thought made her shiver. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the reflection. The smile. The too late blink. Her stomach churned. She grabbed her phone, needing proof she wasn't losing her mind. Slowly, she turned on the front camera. Her heart pounded as she lifted it to face herself. The screen lit up. Her own tired eyes stared back. No smile. No lag. Just her. Eliza let out a shaky breath. Maybe she was imagining. Then the screen glitched. For half a second, her reflection grinned. Her phone slipped from her hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Her pulse thundered. Something was still watching. The next morning, Danny called in a panic. "Check your messages," he said. His voice was shaky. Eliza grabbed her phone, heart pounding. A text from Danny. A screenshot. She opened it. It was a photo. A group picture of her, Danny, and her breath hitched. There was an empty space between them. Like someone had been there but was erased. Danny's voice came through the phone. "Look at your old photos. Any of them?" Eliza's hands trembled as she scrolled through her gallery. Her birthday. A road trip. A late-night diner visit. Every single photo had a missing space. A void where someone should be. Her vision blurred. Her stomach dropped. "Danny," she whispered. "Who did we lose?" A knock sounded at the door. Eliza froze. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A text from Danny. "Don't open the door." Her pulse spiked. Another knock. Louder this time. Eliza's hands shook as she backed away. Then her phone screen lit up. A video call request. From her own number. Her vision blurred. The knocking stopped. And the screen on her phone showed her own face. Smiling. Eliza's heart hammered in her chest. Her own face grinning stared at her through the phone screen. The call was still ringing. She didn't dare answer. Her fingers trembled as she moved to decline. The call answered itself. Her reflection blinked. Too late. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. "You forgot me." The voice was a whisper, echoing from the speaker. Chilling. Familiar. Something snapped in Eliza's mind, a memory forcing its way back. A name. A face. Chloe. Her reflection's smile widened. "But I remember you." Eliza threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall and crashed to the floor, screen cracked. The voice still echoed. "Let me in." Danny burst into Eliza's apartment moments later, out of breath, his face pale. "We need to go," he panted. Eliza barely managed to speak. "Danny, Danny grabbed her arm. "Look outside." She turned to the window. Her stomach plummeted. Every single reflection in the glass on cars, on windows, even on puddles was wrong. People outside walked normally, but their reflections lagged behind. Some of them watched her. One of them, a woman in a pale dress, raised her hand and waved. Danny's grip tightened. "She's coming back." Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. "We let her in." Eliza and Danny sat in the middle of her apartment, surrounded by shattered mirrors and covered screens. They couldn't run. They couldn't hide. She was already here. Danny exhaled shakily. There has to be a way to stop this. Eliza's mind raced. The rules. The exchange. They had given their memories. But Chloe didn't want to be forgotten. She wanted to exist. Eliza swallowed hard. What if we give her something else? Danny frowned. Like what? Eliza turned to him, eyes dark with understanding. A new story? Danny's stomach dropped. Eliza's voice was steady. We let people remember her. We spread the story. She met his gaze. That's why she's still haunting us. We forgot her, but now we know her name again. Danny's throat tightened. So what? We just tell her story. A soft whisper filled the room. Yes. Eliza and Danny sat in front of her laptop, hands shaking as they typed Chloe's name. They wrote everything. The mirror. The hands. The whispers. They didn't leave anything out. As the words filled the screen, the air in the room grew lighter. The reflections outside began to sink again. The whispers faded. Then the phone buzzed. A message. Eliza's breath hitched. Danny leaned closer. What does it say? She swallowed hard. The screen showed a single text. From Chloe's old number. Thank you for remembering me. Then the number vanished. Days passed. No whispers. No lagging reflections. Eliza and Danny told themselves it was over. That they had made things right. One night, Eliza sat at her desk, scrolling through news articles. A headline caught her eye. The legend of Chloe Bellamy, the forgotten ghost of Florida. She clicked on it. Hundreds of comments. People talking about her. Remembering her. Eliza exhaled in relief. She stood up, stretching. And froze. Her laptop screen had dimmed. A dark, faint reflection looked back at her. For a second, she saw someone standing behind her. A girl in a pale dress. Watching. Smiling. Then she was gone. Eliza shivered. Maybe it was just her imagination. Maybe. But as she turned off the light and walked away, the laptop screen flickered one last time. And in the dark reflection, the girl waved. Thank you for listening to this story. But remember, never assume this is just a story. Who knows, something might be listening along with you right now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. But be careful, maybe after this, something else has subscribed behind you. See you in the next tale, and may your night remain peaceful, if it can.